Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another Xanadu Gallery mentorship broadcast with me and Judith Monroe. Today is Tuesday, October 27th, 2015. This is our third broadcast for this year's sessions. It is a pleasure to have all of you here. Have had some great emails with some of you. Also seen some great posts of your work on the Google Plus page. And as we get started, as usual, I'd like to just spend a brief minute going over some of the logistics of the broadcast. I'll mention that there are several different ways that you can participate in these sessions. Of course, you are watching the session now, either live or through the recording. If you're watching live, this is an interactive session, so you can participate in a couple different ways. On the broadcast page itself, there is a button that should appear just below where it says join the video stream live. If you click on that and have a camera on your computer, it'll actually bring you into the session. You'll be able to see us, we'll be able to see you, and at the end of the session you can ask any questions that you have. If you'd rather just watch the stream and not be in live, you can ask questions by emailing me at jason@artbusinessacademy.net. Sometimes I won't get to your questions right in the session that you send them in, but I will try and address all those questions that come across either on the Google Plus page or in a future broadcast. And we have several of those that'll be coming up in our next session, questions that several of you have emailed to me. So, and there's somebody popping in to the live session. Nancy's joined us now. And Nancy, I'm going to go ahead and mute you, but then if you have any questions, we can bring you in live a little bit later on. Today's session, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. Following up from our last time together where we were selecting artwork to feature at the gallery. In the meantime, Judith has been working to get that artwork packed up and shipped over here. And I thought it'd be, just in the interest of kind of following every step of the process along, it'd be a good idea for us to talk a little bit about that. Shipping, packing and shipping are always a challenge. Not only for you as artists, but for us in the gallery. What could possibly go wrong, right? We're packaging up a delicate piece of artwork in cardboard, shipping it halfway across the country in a big truck where people are going to be throwing it around. And so you know that you just have, obviously, some potential for challenges there. And so we're going to talk a little bit about minimizing those risks and challenges as much as possible, and kind of some other aspects that you need to think about when you begin working with galleries and shipping artwork to them, or even when you're shipping artwork to your clients. So Judith, why don't we just start with let's talk first a little bit about any experience that you have with shipping your artwork, and then a little bit about what the experience was of shipping up a good number of pieces to packaging those up to ship them over to me.
Okay, so before this, I had actually shipped a decent amount. Well, I mean, not a ton, but some artwork to galleries. Generally, not as big. That was the big thing this time. Before, anything that I had shipped had been 20 by 20 and smaller, and so
it's a whole other level of complexity. For each inch you go up in size, things definitely become much more complex.
Oh yeah. So yeah, that was the big difference this time, was the size of it. Like I couldn't find a box big enough, so I had to this time, instead of going and finding a box and packing and everything in there, I had to go find. Well, I did look around for a box for quite a bit, and then I ended up finding a place nearby who sells great big sheets of cardboard, and so I got two 48 by 96 inch sheets of cardboard that I had to fold in half to get them in my car. I mean, I can hold big stuff in my car, but 96 inches is a little much.
Yeah.
So then I had to like construct the box around these artworks. So that's kind of how that went. And I sent it off this morning. So I think you should get it in about a week is what the shipper says.
Excellent.
So now I'm just kind of, holding my breath just a tiny bit. But it should be okay. But it's always a little bit nerve-wracking just because, like you said, I'm shipping it not quite halfway across the country, but a fair ways. And thankfully, it's not too delicate. I'm very grateful. I'm glad that I work on wood panels for yet another reason, because then I feel a little less nervous about that. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that process, and really there are kind of two elements of this to wrap your head around and work on, and the one you mentioned is the packaging everything up and figuring out how to put it together. And I don't want to spend too much time necessarily giving my thoughts on that part of the process, because it just is so complicated depending on what size artwork you're shipping, how many pieces are coming together. But I will mention that I've written what I like to think of as a pretty extensive post, and I'll just bring up here so everybody can see. On today's broadcast page, the Mentorship broadcast page, you'll notice a section of resources. And this will also follow the broadcast down into the archives when that time comes. But the first resource there is a blog post I did several years ago now, and I recently updated it and kind of moved it up in the posts. But this post is a pretty good idea of how we approach this question of shipping. I've got all kinds of things buzzing at me here for some reason. In essence, it's a lot of what you described, finding the right materials, either the right telescoping boxes. We use those same. I should buy stock in a company that makes those 4x8 cardboard pads, because we buy them by the by the dozens. I probably buy easily 100 of those per year. Because they're just so versatile, and you can use them in so many different ways, both for shipping and for separating artwork in your storage. And then there's kind of a lot of other bubble wraps and plastics and all those things. So you'll get my thoughts on this post that I shared in the resource page there. But the main thing is that you just want to, as much as possible, give your artwork sufficient padding and protection from any possible piercing. We always try to double box everything, and you do the best you can and pad things out as much as possible so that you can avoid those the possibility of damage, and ultimately you can never fully avoid that, no matter how well you package the artwork. I don't care if you're putting it in a bulletproof container and putting an armored truck around it. There's still the possibility of damage to artwork. But our experience has been that in the hundreds and hundreds of pieces that we've shipped over the years, probably even thousands of pieces now, it's actually been a very, very small number of incidents that we've ever had of damage. And usually, even when there is an incident, it's not a catastrophic failure in the packaging. There might be a ding or a dent in a frame, or just some kind of issue where we've got to do a small repair before we can reship the artwork out to a client. I have had, and now that you've shipped it out, Judith, I feel I can safely say this. I have had UPS run over a box. Literally, I could see the tire tread marks over the box, and again, there's just not much you can do when something like that happens. But like I say, luckily that's rare enough that we feel like, you know, it's not a crippling thing to have to think about shipping artwork out to clients. The other part of the equation then is the freight question, and you know, what service do you use to get things out to people? And you know, this can really be also quite a challenge, simply because it's you know, there are so many options, and each option has its own benefits and pitfalls. There are a number of different you know, factors in terms of cost involved. And again, just speaking from our experience, we do use UPS quite a bit for packages that are within the parameters of sizes that they'll ship. I know some artists who just hate UPS with a passion because they've had some bad experiences with them, and I'm sure the same is true of FedEx and any of the other carriers that you know, once you have a few bad experiences, it's hard to trust them again. But overall, again, if I look at the overall flow of our shipping and the hundreds and hundreds of pieces that we're sending out with UPS, we've had very few incidents, and the times that we have had problems, you know, we've been able to get some kind of recompense from them if we've insured with them, or, and this brings up a whole other can of worms, this question of insurance. We also carry our own insurance, our business insurance, that covers a lot of our shipping. And so, you know, these are all complications that you kind of iron out and figure out as the more you ship your artwork out, and the more work is selling and moving, the more important it becomes to kind of figure out your approach and your system to shipping. And let's talk, Judith, about what you ended up. You and I emailed a little bit about the question of insurance, and let's just talk about that a little bit. What, you know, you mentioned some of your concerns, and what were some of your thoughts about insurance going into it?
So I told you before, when I shipped things, I had insured the packages for 50% of retail value, so that, you know, if disaster befell, then I would be taken care of. But this time, not only was it the biggest, but then the most, and so there was just a huge amount of money to be insuring for, and I didn't actually end up getting a quote because I was doing it online and it wasn't making it easy for me. But what I did end up deciding to do was to insure it just for about what my materials costs would have been. So I figured, because in materials alone, there's several $100s just in those wood panels
Sure,
that
absolutely.
I love so much. And so, you know, I was like, all right, well, if at least, you know, that's what I would do it. So that's what I ended up doing, and that insurance is about around $1 per $100. So I didn't spend too terribly much on insurance, but like I said, if the worst thing happens, then I can at least go buy new panels and start over.
Yeah.
But that's not going to
Perish the thought.
on wood here. I was trying to be very careful about all that. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is, you know, in my experience in working with a lot of artists who are shipping artwork to me, the vast majority of them are, I think it'd be safe to say, are self-insuring the work. You know, they're taking kind of the risk on themselves. You know, again, it is terrible to think about what would happen if artwork were damaged in shipping. But looking at the overall picture, you know, how many pieces are going to be damaged over the course of my business career, my art career, and what percentage would a loss or two be of my the total value of work that I'm creating and shipping? And usually for most artists, unless the work is extremely delicate, it's going to be a pretty small percentage of the total value of your work. And so I think that for most artists it makes sense Especially when cash flow can be tight for an artist. If you were certainly if you were paying the carrier's insurance for the full value or 50% of the value of all the artwork you were shipping out, you would be spending a significant amount of money over time doing that, and it's hard to imagine that cost of insurance would outweigh the losses that you have. And the other problem that you can run into, especially with a carrier like a UPS or a FedEx that have their own insurance companies, if you start having a significant amount of damage, if your work is insured and you start having a significant amount of damage, they'll no longer allow you to insure with them. And so it's kind of a dinged if you do and danged if you don't kind of issue. And so, again, especially for artists like glass artists or ceramicists, this becomes much more of an issue, and it becomes a good idea for those artists especially to consider getting their own insurance policy and offsetting it that way. Now, I will tell you that we also, as we're shipping artwork, we will sometimes do exactly what you did and put a small insurance amount on the piece, $500 or even $750 or something like that. I think partly out of superstition, we feel like if we put some insurance on it, maybe, just maybe, the UPS driver will be a little more careful, although you and I both know that they don't really care. They don't know how much insurance is on it. But somehow it makes us feel a little bit better that we've got that there. And we did have a case where there was some damage to a piece, and the insurance we had put on it helped offset our deductible with our insurance company. So, you kind of just, I would suggest, especially as you start working with a gallery or galleries, or if you're beginning to sell more online, it makes sense to do your homework and run some calculations on how much insurance costs, how much it would cost to insure it with the carriers versus having your own insurance, which carriers offer the best policies, and just kind of do the calculations so that you can come up with the definitive answer in your mind and for your business of what's going to make sense, and kind of have a system in place for shipping, so that you don't have to reinvent the shipping wheel every time you're trying to get a package ready to go out. The and then the other thing I would mention, and this is kind of especially important.
Lost you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Great. You can hear me, and I can't hear you. So once again, we're going to hold on just a second here while I reset the audio. Okay, Judith, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, and now I can hear you. Okay, we're back on track here. So the other consideration, and I'm not quite sure where I cut out there, but the other consideration that you really want to take into account as you're getting ready to work with galleries is kind of thinking strategically about how you're going to hopefully be able to group shipments. As Judith and I are doing, she's shipping me a number of pieces all at once, and if it's at all possible for you to do that, if you can coordinate with the gallery to try and, ship at the beginning of the season or to replace several pieces at once, give them enough inventory so that you're not constantly trying to keep up with each sale that they're doing, that's going to have a huge impact on your overhead and shipping expenses, because what you'll find is that it often will cost you exactly the same to ship one piece as it does to ship 5 pieces. And so if you can ship 5 pieces all together, you've just reduced your shipping expenses significantly, basically by 4/5 instead of shipping each of those pieces individually over the course of time. And so, it's not always going to be possible to do that, and there are certainly times where we have a client who needs to see a specific piece right now, and it's not going to do to wait, and so that individual piece has to be shipped over to us. But if we can avoid that, we will. And the other thing that we'll often do, and many of my artists kind of plan their travel schedules around this, is that they'll think about, if I have a gallery in Scottsdale and a gallery in Santa Fe and one in California, is there some way that I can build up a large number of pieces and hop in the truck or van or car or whatever and make the rounds and do a road trip and visit each of those galleries with new work to replace, and maybe rotating artwork from the Santa Fe gallery into the Scottsdale gallery, and just do a shuffling that way, so that you can kind of maximize your maximize your movement of artwork and minimize the expenses involved with that. And obviously, as you're getting launched and kind of beginning to build relationships with galleries, that might not make sense, but it's just something to keep in mind over time. What are the ways that I can hopefully kind of start to build in some efficiency in what I'm doing, and try to cut expenses without cutting any corners there. So my plan, Judith, is that as your artwork arrives this next week, I'm going to kind of document our receipt of that artwork. I'll take some photos so people can kind of see what the packaging was. Hopefully my photos will show the boxes in pristine condition, and the labels and all of that. And you get to see that, and then I'm also going to kind of document our unpacking and hanging of the artwork. So that's going to be one of the focuses of the next session, is kind of seeing the process of receiving the artwork, hanging it, and then you'll also get to see all of the documentation. What we do to inventory it into our system, and wall tags and pricing and getting it onto the website and all that kind of stuff. So, we started something we can't stop now. Now that the artwork is shipping here, the machine kind of starts to kick into gear, and I'll kind of show you what all of that process looks like from our end. And then the other thing, I think that kind of covered the main things that I wanted to hit on shipping. But again, for those of you in the session, and in fact, is there anyone in the live session that wants to toss out a question about shipping artwork? And if you do, just give me a hand, and I'll bring you in live. Otherwise, if you have questions about logistics and shipping artwork, as always, feel free to email me at the jason@artbusinessacademy.net address, and I'll bring those into either into this conversation or future conversations. No one? Going once, twice? Oh, I've got one here. Brenda.
Hey.
If you, what questions do you have or comments? Oops. We're already unmuted. If you want to, looks like you're now muted. There we go. Gotcha.
Okay. So I was wondering, I've been working in oils and in pastels, and pastels are generally, well, you have to frame them in glass, and they get pretty heavy.
Yes, they do.
I was wondering, is it feasible to roll the price of shipping and framing, and well, particularly the shipping, because I've shipped one before. It ended up costing around like $200 to ship it. Is it feasible to roll that price into the pricing of your artwork when you're showing it?
Yeah, absolutely, and that brings that's a great question and a great point. And it does open another can of worms to start thinking about pricing, but your suggestion that somehow that needs to be encompassed is exactly right, and it's a little bit of a challenge because you can't, especially if you are not going to be shipping all of the work that you're selling, you don't necessarily want to, you don't want to have the shipping impact your pricing in a way that you're pricing yourself out of the market now.
Right.
So what you kind of want to try to do is to strike a balance between your pricing and your shipping costs and the number of pieces that you're ultimately going to end up shipping. Now, what I'll say is that certainly in the situation that we're in right now, where Judith is going to be showing in my gallery, and there's we're hopefully going to see kind of a steady stream of artwork being shipped this direction as work sells over time. She'd want to be monitoring and kind of paying attention to what those total shipping costs are adding up to, and compare that against sales so that she knows what her profit margins are, after those shipping expenses are incurred, so that she can make sure the pricing she set on the work allows for all of those expenses and still has a profit. Now, with what you're talking about, pastels, it becomes, and water media and anything else that's under glass, it does definitely become more complicated. Photography would fit into this as well, where not only is it going to weigh more, it is also going to become more fragile. You've got more potential for damage there. And so it's a good idea to get a good sense of, even just theoretically, what is it going to cost me to ship one of these pieces? And the way you would do that is, kind of estimate the size of a box you're going to need, figure out what those packaging materials would be, and then run a simulated shipment on UPS or FedEx and assume you're shipping it to the furthest corner of the country that you could possibly imagine. If you're in California, run a price quote to Portland, Maine, and see what those shipping costs would be, and then like I say, work that back into your retail price to make sure that retail price encompasses and covers those shipping costs. But again, you have a little bit of room to play with that because it's likely that you're not going to be shipping every single piece that you sell. Sometimes you're going to be selling to local buyers, and that may not be an issue then. And so you can kind of amortize those shipping costs over your total retail production for the year, and hopefully that helps you keep the prices down. The other thing that I'll mention is that if you're selling directly to collectors at shows or those kind of events, it's not uncommon at all for you to have the retail price and then charge shipping to your customer. And again, having done some of that research ahead of time, you're going to be in a much better position to know what to ask your clients to pay in terms of those shipping costs. And I guess it bears mentioning here too that you kind of want, especially again as you're working with a gallery, you want to make sure you understand what expectations are in terms of who's going to be responsible for shipping costs. Most, or at least traditionally, most galleries have asked the artist to be responsible for shipping costs to get the artwork from the studio to the gallery. And then if the artwork doesn't sell after a time and the artist needs that artwork back in the studio, or if it needs to be shipped on to another gallery, the gallery would assume responsibility for the shipping costs of getting that artwork back to the artist or onto the other gallery. That's not always going to be the case, though. So, especially as you're entering into a new relationship with a gallery, you want to look for that in the consignment agreement or have a conversation with the owner of the gallery about those shipping costs so that there's no misunderstanding of who's going to be paying the bill when the artwork has to move from one place to another.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Any other questions, comments? Okay, if not, we'll roll on to kind of the next topic I want to cover tonight, and that is I want to begin the process of thinking about marketing materials, and the reason I want to start this now is because this is going to take us a little bit of time to work on and work through. And so specifically today, and I'm again going to bring this up so you can see it, I want to talk a little bit about the biography, the artist's biography today. And this is I consider, after your images of your artwork, the work itself, I consider your biography to be one of your most important marketing tools, if not your most important marketing tool. My ability as a gallery owner to sell your artwork is going to be greatly improved if I can really help my customers get a sense that they know who you are as an artist. And so your biography and kind of telling me your story is going to help me be able to better tell that story to your collectors. And then also, we use the artist's biography extensively in our follow-up efforts when we're marketing your work. And for that matter, we use it when in our initial marketing efforts. It's on our website so that people who are discovering your work can learn a little bit about you. And so I am, I'm an advocate of putting some real work into crafting an engaging, well-written biography. I know that this is a bit of a challenge for many artists because you're not naturally writers. If you'd wanted to be a writer, you would have been a writer instead of a painter or a sculptor, photographer. And so, I know that it can feel like a tremendous amount of work and something that just doesn't come naturally to you. But there have been so many cases in my gallery where the biography has really been a determining factor in making a sale to a collector, where they were interested in the work. I felt that initial kind of I would call it kind of the raw emotional attraction to the artwork. And then in a lot of cases, a buyer will kind of have to logically work their way through of justifying that attraction. And being able to share an artist's biography with the collector is a really powerful tool for us to be able to help them move through understanding your artwork. And so we work pretty hard with our artists to create or help them enhance what's already existing of their biographies so that we can do that. And so I have here, and I'm just going to put you a little bit on the spot here, Judith, and I have here your biography from your website, which is a perfectly competent, lovely biography that is way too short, in my opinion. In essence, and it really does do a fine job of kind of establishing some credibility. You've given here, and by the way, everyone, you can go straight to her website and read what she has here. JudithMonroe.com on the About page. And you'll see that it does a great job of talking a little bit about what the work is and giving a little bit of Judith's background. And in essence, what we've got here is a little bit of a resume in paragraph format. Here are some things that I've accomplished, and here's what I've done, a little bit of my background, which, again, is a great start. And what I'd like to do is just build from that and create a narrative around it that gives people a sense of, I know Judith's story. I know who she is. I know kind of what her background is, where she's coming from. And what then will happen is that collectors will start to feel like, aha, now I understand a little bit of why she creates the work that she does and what the process was for her getting there. And so I'm going to, well, actually, before I say that, Judith, maybe just tell me a little bit about the process of creating this biography, and is this kind of your current version of the biography? Are there other versions out there?
Oh, there are many versions out there in my computer. and I'm not sure, I didn't see anything earlier. I don't know if you were meant to put something up for people to see, because all I saw was an interesting little bouncy thing with your standard profile photo. Anyway, so we didn't see a document.
No. Apparently we are having Google issues again. So what I was showing was your website with the biography there.
Ah, okay. Well, at least you can go look at it later if you can't see it there. So one of many versions. I even mentioned in an email to you that when you had gone through this with Carolee, I had worked on something more extensive and was not really pleased with it. And so that is in, one draft of that is in my computer, along with, multiple drafts. Well, sometimes I've had people ask for, a very short one-paragraph bio. So there's that version in my computer as well. And I have training as a writer, but it's not my chosen form of art, as you may have noticed, and it's a whole other thing when I'm writing about myself.
Exactly.
It's a crazy thing, so hard.
Yeah. So and that is completely understandable, and again, this is a challenge I think that every artist faces at some point, and I do feel like it is a good idea to have several different versions of your biography going, the short, medium, and long versions. And frankly, some people could care less about your story and your background. They just see the art, they like it, they want to buy it, and the less they know about you, the happier they are. And that's fine too. But it's a good idea to kind of have the range available, so that for those who are really interested, you can kind of offer that meatier, deeper biography. And what I find is that I can always kind of tell who's going to end up becoming a collector of an artist's work, because they really kind of sink their teeth into the biography, and they'll come into an artist's show or an opening, and they'll mention details of the artist's life, something that they picked up from the biography. You really get the sense that they're investing not only in the artwork, but they're also really wanting to become followers and collectors of the artist. And so if we can kind of give that depth, like I say, that really is a powerful tool to use. And so I'm going to have you, Judith, I'm going to have you go ahead and send me the draft of the longer version you were working on.
All right.
I'm going to try this again. And tell me if you are seeing my screen now, Judith. Hold on just a second here. Anything coming up now?
I see the page, like the broadcast page.
Okay, and are you seeing resources for this broadcast?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, good. So on the resources section here, I've included a couple of sample biographies, including Carolee Clark's, which you mentioned, Judith, which is one that we worked on for our mentorship artist 2 years ago, and then another one for Robert Burt, who is an artist that I had represented for many, many years. And these will kind of serve as good, just kind of a good idea of the scope and scale of what I like to see in a biography. Not to say that the details of your life obviously is going to be very different from what you're seeing in their life, but it'll just give you an idea of the kind of details that you might include in your biography, and it'll also give you a little bit of an idea of structure, what you might use for a narrative to build around. And I also am going to include, and you can see that I've already put the header here, but somehow didn't include the link to the document itself. We'll fix that. I'm going to include a biography primer, which is a series of questions that I've created that should give you a great jumping off point. If you'll answer these questions in some detail, you can almost then just take your answers to those questions and plug them in to your writing of your biography, and it'll give you some great structure. And you'll see it ask questions about your history and your background, how you became an artist, who your inspirations have been, and just kind of some details that I have over the years have found to be the questions that I'm most commonly hearing collectors ask about artists. And so these questions will serve as kind of a a preemptive strike against those questions that you'll already have worked through some of the answers and will have answered them for your collectors. And so my suggestion, and Judith, we're going to cheat a little bit with you because I'm going to have you go ahead and send me the draft of what you had. I'm going to have you respond to the bio primer, and then I'm going to have my staff writer help us draft up a version of the biography incorporating all of that, so that we can kind of move towards that finished version as quickly as possible. But for the rest of you that are following along, I would suggest you kind of follow the same path. Download the bio primer questionnaire and answer those questions to the greatest extent possible, and then take a look at the sample bios that are there and the biography that we're going to create for Judith, and kind of let that be a spark of inspiration for you to do the same thing in your biography. And I'll tell you, I already know what many of you are going to say when you read these biographies. You're going to say, "Oh, but Jason, they're just so long. Nobody's really going to read all of that. The details of every artist's life they're basically the same. I loved art since I was a little kid. My first word was crayon or painting or whatever." And you're going to say that's just all so boring. And why would anyone want to read all of that? And what I'll tell you is that, again, not everyone does, but remember, the collector who walks into my gallery and is interested in your work, they're not seeing it in the context of every other artist who has ever lived. They're not reading everybody else's biography. They're interested in you and your story. And especially if they feel that strong emotional connection to your work, they really will want to get as much detail about you as possible. And then, as I mentioned, the other thing that we use these for is our follow-up with collectors. And so it's often the case that I'll have someone come into the gallery and see your work, express some initial interest in it, and of course we're working very hard to convert that initial interest into a sale. But sometimes a client, for whatever reason, needs to think about it. They need to measure their space, or they need to speak to a spouse or a designer, or whatever it is. And so we will make every effort to get their contact information so that we can do some follow-up with them. And our first follow-up is to thank them for visiting the gallery. We include an image of the artwork, and all the information, sizing, pricing, etc., and send that off to them. And obviously have an invitation there. We would love to have you see you acquire this piece. Let us know how we can be of service. Kind of catered to that particular person. And often after that first email, we'll get silence back. We get no response. And so the next thing to do then is to continue our follow-up process, and it's great to have kind of a follow-up strategy in place that allows you to give the client new information each time you're contacting them. It gives you an excuse to be in touch with them, to give them new information. I'm not just following up and pestering you. I actually have pertinent new information for you. And so the biography becomes the second email. Here is the artist's biography. You can learn a little bit more about the artist here. Let us know if you have any questions, and let us know how we can be of service. And in a couple of sessions from now, we're going to talk about the artist statement. We'll touch on your resume, and each one of those things is going to become a part of this follow-up process that we're going to be doing. And like I say, for us, it's usually the biography that ends up being the one that gets the client to move over the finish line, because it really helps establish your credibility as an artist, and helps engage them and helps them understand your life and your work a little bit better. So comments or questions, Judith, on biography or thoughts?
Not really. I probably will cheat and tweak the ones before I send it to you, just because. That's
good. Yeah. There are no rules against that. So that'll be perfect, and we'll kind of get that process started. And like I say, I wanted to get this started tonight because it could potentially take us, several weeks to get a first draft back and forth, and then usually there's some follow-up back and forth there. And then I have to reassure you, you're going to say to me, but Jason, my life is so boring, this just isn't interesting. And I'll reassure you that, yes, it is interesting. And, by the time we get through that, it'll take 3 or 4 weeks to get everything processed and done. So with that, I think we've covered what I wanted to talk about tonight. Did anybody in the live session have comments or questions about biography? Want to make any comments about your currently existing biography? And again, if so, give me a hand and I'll pull you in. And while you're doing that, okay, I see Nancy. If you want to unmute yourself, you can come in and ask a question.
Hi. Do I remember correctly that you offered a service, Jason, at one point to have your where you could hire your writer to help write a biography?
Yes, and if I were good at advertising myself, I'd be splashing that all over the screen, and you should sign up. But actually, and we do still offer that service. I'll tell you, though, that I need to hire a cadre of writers because there was so much demand for that, and my writer has such limited bandwidth to be able to do that I think right now we're something like 6 or 8 weeks behind on biographies. I'll put that link up as in the resource session as well, but just realize that if you're going to use our writer, there will be a significant time lag, especially when we add Judith into the mix. Obviously, she's going to get a little bit of priority there, but just realize that our writer will be a little bit behind. And I'll mention, too, that often it's the case that you could find someone in your life, a friend or family member who is, who has some real talent writing, and if you can employ them, bring them in and have them look at the sample biographies that I'm sharing with you and your bio primer. Sometimes a friend can help you through that process, and you could also, there are a lot of services online that offer freelance writers. That could also do that for you. So if you just feel like it's really not within your realm of comfort to write your own biography, or if you need someone to kind of go over it and polish it and make it sound more professional, this is certainly something that could be worth the investment. And freelance writing is a lot less expensive than you might imagine it to be. So again, you just want to kind of ultimately, you want to take your biography and kind of compare it to some of the samples that I've included, or look at some of the biographies in the artist magazines, International Art Collector or Southwest Art, and see how those are written, and just aim to have your biography follow those same kind of guidelines and style. And again, as I mentioned, that really can help build credibility. There's something in our nature, our human nature, that we feel like if somebody has something written about them, They must be important. They must be significant. And so, you'll see even in the samples that we've created them in a magazine-style layout. We want it to feel like, obviously the artist that you're interested in is someone of some import, and you can feel confident in buying their work because they are well established, and that writing really goes a long way to do that. Any other questions or comments? And before I sign us off here, let me hop over, hang with me here while I hop over to our email, or not. There we go. I'll just take a quick glance to see if I got any, and I have not gotten any questions in the email. So if you do have questions, or if you're watching the recording and can't ask the question live, again, my email is jason@artbusinessacademy.net, and I'll be happy to respond to those questions or bring them up in our next session. And we will plan on our next session. If I'm right, Judith, we should be 2 weeks from now, the second Tuesday of November, so that would be November 10th. And like I said, that session is going to focus on the receipt of the artwork and showing you kind of our process for bringing that in and hanging the artwork and displaying it. And I've got some other things that I want to share with you in that process, and then we're going to kind of launch into talking about some marketing and promotional aspects of making our collectors familiar with Judith's work. So we've got a lot of ground to cover in the next couple of sessions as we kind of swing into our high season here in Scottsdale, so it should be a lot of fun. So look forward to having all of you join us. Judith, as always, thank you so much for being here. And we'll be in touch here shortly and talk to everybody soon. We'll see you all in the next session.